Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the Daily Medicine Transmission for June 22nd, 2021. We are officially in summer in the Northern Hemisphere, officially in winter in the Southern Hemisphere. The sun is in Cancer, and today Mercury stations retrograde. Now, don't get too excited. Don't get too excited. We still have until about July 7th until it comes out of its post-retrograde shadow, meaning it passes the point that it went retrograde in the first place, which was at 25 degrees Gemini. So we have some old territory that we are still going to be moving through, but now that Mercury is stationing direct, there is a metamorphosis that is coming back online after we've had all of this time to review, to possibly be engaged with the trickster energy, inner evaluation, reevaluation, going over our notes, going over our own process of conceptualization. That's important too. How do we even interact with the world around us? And is it accurate? And of course, now that the sun is in Cancer, the sign of the vessel and the containment in which we really apply that Gemini energy, it's on now. It's definitely on. And so we're going to go over some astrology today. Wait till you see the reading. Wow, I cannot make this shit up. So welcome back to my subscribers, my audience. You truly are the lifeblood of this channel and keeps me going. And if you're new here, welcome. It's so great to have you here. And as always, whenever you interact with content, by independent content creators like myself, it actually does support their channels, especially if you don't have sponsorship, if you're not monetized on YouTube, if you don't buy your subscribers, your views, any of that stuff. Anytime you interact with this content, it actually does help the message go out to a larger and wider audience. So thank you in advance, and let's get right into it. Let's exit out of the studio mode here. All right, guys. So there's a couple things that I want to address I think are really just interesting to bring up, and something that really occurred to me. So first of all, how's everybody feeling? Wow, the feels have been so intense. I definitely was at a point of just total surrender. And with that water trine yesterday, that's exactly what we were brought to do, is to really surrender and allow the flow of emotions to move through us and our feelings to be fully present and to feel it for what it is and just sit in it. I've given that advice to many people, and so it's important that, especially if we find ourselves in this role as a guide or a teacher or as a counselor, and we are giving advice to people and guidance, that we're also following it. And sometimes it's a little bit more difficult when you don't have anybody else holding you accountable. So speaking of holding accountable, I just want to address that I do realize that there are some days where I am not as put together and as coherent as I'd like to be. And, it would be a lot easier, and many people do this, right? It's a lot harder to come live every single day and just trust that what's going to come through in the moment is going to be the right thing. It's a lot easier to polish your work, right? It's a lot easier to write it out, to go back and edit it. And there's something to be said for that, of course, because when you can edit your work, you can polish it, you can narrow it down. And this is the benefit of writing, right? Because you can go back over it and make sure it's exactly crafted the way that you want it to be. And there's a lot of value to that in terms of communicating a message. And I don't want to say that that's not a valuable tool. I mean, writing is my preferred mode of communication, to be honest. It's always been my preferred mode and has been one of my main creative outlets is writing. I do have fifth house Gemini, so it's not surprising. But there is something to be said for the accountability of being authentic and raw in the moment along with everybody, because I'm going through it just as much as everyone else. And I think what we need more than anything right now, and what this live presentation and broadcast provides, I think, on a daily basis, is the opportunity to just be seen, right? There's a tendency to be in these positions, right? As an astrologer, I'm very much a counselor, right? And I've been a counselor for my whole life, and I've been trained as a counselor in social work, and for years and years with body work clients and energy work clients. So all of that is a direct one-on-one contact with another human being, being present with them and helping them. But sometimes there's a tendency to want to fix people's problems, right? To give them the advice or give them that nugget of information that we think that they need. But honestly, at this point, it feels to me, and this is my experience as well, and this is why I think I'm willing to venture a guess here that the starseed population is becoming increasingly more isolated feeling, right? At least I know that, and I can attest to my personal conversations with other people who I know for a fact are also starseeds. Either they're my clients or they're my personal friends, and the isolation is becoming very difficult because the bifurcation is just becoming so obvious and so palpable and so much a daily reality of trying to manage bridging that gap, right? And so Mercury going direct in Gemini at this point is really, I think, going to assist in this process, but it really comes down to just being seen. Just being seen and acknowledged for who we are is probably more important, I would say, than just about any piece of advice, any astrological reading that you can give, any type of intuitive reading that you can give, counseling, whatnot. It's really about being seen. And that is really what happens in the Scorpio and 8th house realm, right? Is being seen and having others, being present to see other people, holding that space for yourself and then for the others that you're in relationship with. And sometimes that is really, really painful and really overwhelming emotionally. And there's no fixing that. It's kind of like a square. There's no real fixing that or resolving that. You just have to sit in it. And sometimes the most supportive and the most beneficial thing that we can do for each other in these moments is to just hold space and see people, really see people, and reflect back to them that we see them. And so when I come live and I am kind of all over the place, it's my accountability to be authentic, right? And to show up and not try to polish anything or come off as if I know everything about this situation. And I'm not saying that in itself is like I said, it's not a negative thing to polish your work, edit your work, put out a very concise statement in terms of your work, whatever it is. But there's something here. And even me coming live, even if there's one person, even if there's no person that's here with me in this moment, at least I'm putting myself out there to be seen. And it keeps me accountable in the moment to just trust what's coming through rather than to project an image that I have it all put together when I actually don't, because we're all going through this together. So it's something that I really wanted to address, because this is part of emptying the vessel, right? We absolutely have to empty it. And if that means that this tower comes in and pulls it all down, or if it means that we are just so emotionally overwhelmed in the moment that we just have to surrender and give it up, that is emptying the vessel. And we can't create anything new. We can't if there's no space for something new to come in, then we're just kind of recycling and rehashing old shit. And we're well past that right now. So, and it's not to say that there is not still karmic stuff to work through. We're all doing that right now. But I just wanted to acknowledge that a couple different things, mostly that I was completely out of my mind yesterday. And maybe you didn't notice, but I certainly did, because I feel a lot different right now. And that's because the moon is in Sagittarius, okay? The moon has moved out of Scorpio into Sagittarius, and this is really going to give us the strength to really hold space for ourselves as we move into today, tomorrow, and then the full moon on Thursday, because there's some really incredible transits that are coming, and the strength right? The moon in Sagittarius is, in fact, the Nine of Wands, that strength card, that we've been through a lot, and we can very much dig deep into the coal fire that is the alchemical fire within us in order to transform, in order to alchemize something, right? And to create something new, which is really difficult because we are, in fact, in this time with Pluto in Capricorn, where it's going to, completely tear down everything that is related to our physical reality. So it's, again, as the star seeds specifically, and the light workers, but specifically the star seeds, because these are the individuals that are holding the Rh negative blood factor in order to resonate with their star seed origins. And there's a lot of things we can say about that. And I'll post some stuff on social media that I think are really interesting, some anthropological videos about the Rh negative blood type and what ancestry it's related to, because I think it's an important conversation moving forward. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's important that we are making space for something new to come in, and it's also important in that moment to just acknowledge and honor what's coming through us, and to know that there is something within, there's something to be learned. There's a truth to be gained here, as painful as it is and as overwhelming as it is. And so big up on the moon in Scorpio, people, because I know for a fact that it has not been easy. That's where my moon is. And it can be overwhelming. And so there's a couple different threads here that I'm trying to weave together about authenticity and accountability, and just seeing and acknowledging that we're going through our own stuff right now, and to see people for who they truly are. And that's really compassion and unconditional love, right? We're not going to fix everybody's problems, and we're certainly not going to change people's minds by challenging their sense of integrity or their character, right? That's something that it never really works, right? When we attempt to attack people personally and think that that's going to make a difference, it never does. So, but we're going through a lot right now, and I'm thankful actually that the moon is in Sagittarius in this moment, because it is giving us some strength and a place to connect to, right? The alchemical fire is the coal fire. It is the fire that is burned down to the embers that are so hot. This is where you actually can catalyze a reaction. So just keep in mind that the last couple days, they may have been emotionally overwhelming, painful. Maybe you've seen some incredible truths. Maybe they've been blissful. I mean, it's different for everybody, but just know that I see you, and that I personally stick to these live broadcasts so that I can be right along with you as a human being and a starseed, and experiencing things along with you, rather than necessarily trying to prop myself up onto any kind of, pulpit that I have anything that you don't have, right? We all have the capacity to, evolve as a result of our own intuition and our own higher self. And when we share our experiences with each other, then this is where we learn from each other. And sometimes it's just about holding space. So there's a lot to talk about today, that's for sure. So we're going to get into the astrology for today and tomorrow, but Mercury's stationing direct, and like I said, it couldn't happen soon enough as far as I'm concerned. So let's start looking at the chart. We will, let's see here, and see what's going on. The moon is now in Sagittarius, so if you're feeling a little bit of a optimistic lift after a moon in Scorpio that was in an opposition to Uranus, wow. That was intense. Here we go, guys. Now we have a little bit of a lift. So here we go. This is our current transit. We got the moon right in Sagittarius right now. Just came in. And the Mars is in Leo right now. And as you can see, Venus is getting very close to her opposition to Pluto retrograde. This is going to happen tomorrow, later in the day tomorrow. And we're going to, what we value, who we value, what is valuable to us in all different ways. We're going to feel the storm move through in some ways, and we're going to want to pull in and condense in some ways what it is that we want to, what is worth protecting. And with all oppositions, right, we have to find this fulcrum point in the middle, because we can get pulled very easily, especially with Pluto, because that's kind of the soul's last word, isn't it? The soul's last word is Pluto in terms of the soul's power of transformation. And then Venus is the Empress, right? She is the incarnation of the divine feminine into a physical three-dimensional form in some ways. So there's going to be this opposition where we want to pull in and protect that which is valuable to us and our loyalties, right? This is why yesterday's reading was so important. It really put us on notice, right? Whom are we serving, right? What are we serving? Who are we serving? What masters are we giving our power away to? Because that's going to be really relevant when this opposition happens. And at the same time, you're going to see tomorrow, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but the transits tomorrow are really, really significant. So I want to bring it up now, because the moon's going to pass Antares. It's going to pass the south node, opposition to the north node in Gemini. Mercury is now stationing direct at this point. And so there's going to be an activation, right? It's going to get turned back on into rather than a review, it's test time, right? It's time to apply all of our study and our review and our reorientation, whatever Mercury retrograde provided for us and wherever it happened in our chart, it's going to start coming back online. And now we're going to apply everything that we have reviewed on this territory that Mercury had gone through before it went retrograde, right? So we're looking at earlier in May, what was going on. And so hopefully we are at a place of mental maturity, right? The ability to go from being a robust youth into a mature thinker. This is what 17 degrees of Gemini represents in terms of a Sabian symbol. And so it's about being able to turn and transmute our emotions into an intelligent thought. And that can be really difficult when the surge of feeling, especially with Scorpio and that grand water trine with Neptune and Venus in Cancer, it was so intense. Like there was nothing that could really be done, I think, except just surrender to it. And yesterday where I'm at, it's just storm season, right? So it's just storming and storming and storming. And you remember how I talked about months ago that if you don't have, the proper channels in your basement, quote unquote, your subconscious for these things to flow through without making a mess, that you're going to get flooded. Well, yesterday was definitely the test, right? That was a real test. And I could say that was a real test for my actual basement that has now a system in place in order to keep it dry, because it was a deluge, right? It was just pouring and pouring and pouring. So if you're feeling overwhelmed emotionally, or you were yesterday, you are in good company, because it is just part of how this water trine and wanting access to the truth, right? The search for illumination being such a strong energy, and to have Uranus right here at Taurus. Oh boy. Let's just talk about it, right? Because I'm kind of jumping around. So first, I want to bring up the fact that just hours before, the moon was in a sextile right here with Pluto retrograde. So Scorpio and Pluto retrograde, there's a connection here. There's a familiarity in terms of where Pluto is familiar with. And so there was an incredible moment of transformation that if we were to invest these energies, right, of the moon in late Scorpio, because at this point, you've seen and felt a lot. You've seen the shadow, you've been mirrored, you have the feeling-based experience, and you realize the power of cooperative, right? Whether it's a ritual, whether it's sexual intimacy or sexual alchemy, whether it is your domestic resources in any kind of like partnership, business resources. It's really about the power inherent in our cooperation that comes about as in Scorpio. And in late Scorpio, we are aggressively in some ways, showcasing. It's like the Sabian symbol is like a military band marching through the street. Like it's this the social unity that comes out of these cultural values that we discover as a result of our cooperation together. And Scorpio, there's a lot of military connection in Scorpio and Sagittarius as well, but it's again, you come to realize your camaraderie in the Scorpio realm. And so we definitely feeling when we've come out of that grand trine, right? And we're still in it when this is happening. So you can see now that the kite is being activated, right? Here's the spine of the kite, and there's the top of it. And then the water trine right here is what makes up the majority of it. So it's starting to get this kite is starting to get more active. And so these sextiles from at the top of it is really how we, again, manage. This is important because this is how we're going to manage this opposition. The tension here is important along the spine of the kite so that it stays in its shape and that it is able to fly. Which is interesting because today's Sabian symbol for the sun is being on a magic carpet, like hovering. And I would say put your perspective out to the moon, right? I mean, that's pretty appropriate for Cancer since that is that's the rulership of the moon is Cancer. Being able to have that larger perspective and also investing our energy from this moon in Scorpio to Pluto and as well with Neptune in Pisces, right? Which is finding our dharma, accepting our limitations so that we can be realistic about what we're here to do and really consolidate and centralize our focus, our magical focus, our transcendent focus, our spiritual focus, all these Piscean aspects, right? Creativity, imagination, dreams, right? It's the transcendental mystical realm. And so, and it's about the collective unconscious. We can invest this energy into where Pluto is sitting, because if we don't do that, then we risk being just taken over by the destruction of the old. And lots of people are pushing back against this. It's normal, right? It's normal. And so to have this sextile here, when we can invest this energy is to almost value the destruction, if that makes sense, because we know, and to be culturally and socially bound together with our excitement about it, because when we can do that, then we accept the cycle that this Pluto and Capricorn is representing. And it's just going to get more intense because this is, Pluto's moving retrograde, but that doesn't mean that eventually it's not going to cross to a Pluto return for the United States. I mean, this is really just gearing up. And now we have these planets all retrograde. So you can see that there is something to be invested in terms of this water trine, as intense and as incredibly potent as it was. We want to keep the tension, right? We don't want to pull one way or the other, then the kite breaks. And we want to find the fulcrum point. So part of that too is investing ourselves emotionally and our intuition and our depth of feeling about the truth into Pluto's process. Because like I said, final word of the soul is Pluto. It's the final word of the soul's transformation, and we're talking collectively, our collective soul, where Pluto is at, and it's pulling it all down. It's pulling it all down. So in some ways, if we can rally around that, even within ourselves, I think that we have a lot more. There'll be a lot more success, and they will be able to really apply the moon and Sagittarius energy with that optimism and big picture to this whole process, rather than getting caught, I would say, in trying desperately to cling to what is inevitably going away. And this is where the opposition comes in, because Venus, for all of the beautiful, harmonious aspects that she represents, she wants to be comfortable. And in Cancer, she wants everything to be tight-knit and protective, and she has a lot of loyalty. And this is why it's important to know, because that storm's going to rage through the canyon, and we're going to have to consolidate to what is our bare bones commitments, and what is it that we are loyal and faithful to, and realize that everything else is just going to go out the window. And that's tomorrow. At the same time, the sun, like I said, is going to trine now a retrograde Jupiter. So Jupiter is now expanding all of our own consciousness within, right? Going retrograde and moving back into the earlier degrees of Pisces, Jupiter will move back into Aquarius before it stations direct. So there expansion, but inside of us, expansion of our own soul, expansion of our collective, the collective unconscious and our relationship to it. And, Jupiter's a benefactor, right? Jupiter is good fortune and advocacy. And so there is something to be said here for this expansion of our consciousness within our own consciousness and having access to the fragments of past lives, right? Past lives, our ancestry, our collective karma. We're going to start expanding within to see where those fragments are within us, right? And this is really motivating a lot of what's happening. And it's not an easy process. But Jupiter, thankfully, is, like I said, he's an advocate and is benefic. And so if we see that for what it is, even though it is retrograde, so it's going to look like it's moving backwards, if we acknowledge that it's really an illusion of perception, we can harness this. Now, the trine here to the sun, this is all still tomorrow. I feel like it's really important that I point this out, and then we'll move back to today's transits because they're not very significant, but they're setting us up for what is tomorrow to be very significant. And then we have the full moon on Thursday, which is really going to show us what we need to do to get our shit together and get to somewhere. And how to assimilate everything that we have learned so far. Remember that new moon was a solar eclipse. And so not only is it going to reverberate out through this whole cycle, it's going to reverberate out through the whole eclipse cycle, which is coming, the next one is November and December. So there will be a testing of the will, right? The sun is going to be at that third degree of Cancer, and we will have to, if you think it's bad, if you think it's hard now, hopefully if you saw and really engaged with yesterday emotionally, even though it was intense and powerful, then this trine with Jupiter retrograde that's expanding our own consciousness, expanding so that we can access the fragments of previous incarnations, previous cycles, because as we're going to have to express ourselves through this testing of our will. That's the part of Cancer that is why stabilization is so important, because we have to be able to be stable in the world around us in order for our character to develop, and that means we're going to be tested. And in some ways, there may be people that are like, nah, you know what? I'm not stable. I don't want to be, I changed my mind. I don't want to be here anymore. And definitely there was a lot of that feeling yesterday. So it will come right to the forefront and be illuminated tomorrow as well. But the trine to Jupiter and Pisces is, again, an emotional and feeling-based support structure, right, in this process. And it's not gonna, like I said, it's not gonna be easy, but at the same time, we have a lot that we can really get somewhere if we lean into all of this. And I think this sextile to Pluto today at this top of the kite is really important. So, and we'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow because we'll do a reading. But now we're in the moon in Sagittarius. So feeling very optimistic, feeling into the big picture, feeling into our power of transformation, all these Sagittarian things, right? Honesty and truth and the dogma and religion that sometimes can go along with Sagittarius. And remember, this is Jupiter's territory. So, and the moon is very connected to Jupiter. But as you see, they're going to be in a square today. So, but before we get to that point, let's look at this quincunx, right? We're going to have a quincunx here, right here with the sun, the moon in Sagittarius and the sun in Cancer. So, as we know, these quincunxes are opportunities to adjust ourselves. We have so many opportunities all the time to adjust ourselves. This degree of the sun at 2 degrees of Cancer is being able to hover over it, right? Widen our perspective, expand our consciousness by stabilizing our point of view at a higher level, right? Looking at things from this wide vantage point. And so as long as the intellect is restlessly searching, right? Remember that Prince of Swords, recklessly searching, or restlessly, not recklessly, sometimes. well, as long as the intellect, our minds are searching and searching and searching, that end of Gemini, it's going to be confused, right? We eventually have to anchor in somewhere. And once we accept some sort of stable focus, even if it's like way out here, the mind can raise its point of observation and get a better perspective, right? When we're like right down, it's like when you're so close to something, you can't see it for what it is. We have to come back out, and we can still do that while remaining absolutely stabilized to the core of who we are. And this allows us to gain this elevation. So the thing is with this quincunx, though, is that we may be able to express ourselves through this, right? This is the blossoming of who we are, an expression of our passion. The sun represents the center of our own sense of self and creativity. So while that's happening, the moon, though, is like, yeah, but we're still being, it's like the waters of our internal landscape that the moon represents. They're being, it's like choppy water, right? It's like white capped waves, right? And it's the wind, right? It's the wind and the spirit that is disturbing the water. And so we can feel that there are some forces within us that are starting to stir things up. And so we're going to have to adjust ourselves, because while we are expressing ourselves through this ability to look at this much wider perspective and stabilize ourselves in a much wider perspective, emotionally in that moment, it's just like we can tell that the spirit, and Mercury stationing direct today is a big part of this, right? And this will be much more reflected tomorrow when the moon is in an opposition to Mercury. But at the moment, we have to adjust our expectations and adjust ourselves in order to, on the one hand, emotionally know that our the waters within us are starting to be stirred by some force that is the mind, right? The higher mind. Whereas at the same time, the sun, we are expressing ourselves through this ability to have this much more vast and wider perspective, right? Looking at things from the moon, being on a magic carpet, however you want to, wrap your mind around it. So there's our first moment here of really adjusting our expectations. Now, and right from there, almost immediately, then the moon comes and squares a retrograde Jupiter. And this is a mutable square, right? Mutable square. And as the higher mind is starting to disturb the waters, right? Bringing the waves, making it choppy, we see that there is something to be said for this. This square with Jupiter is two men. Okay, it's the Sabian symbol is two men playing chess, and it's the ritualization of conflict, right? And so we're going to start feeling that, where, we're going to start feeling the ritualization and how to use that. Now, we discovered the mirror of ourself in Scorpio, right? And discovered the power inherent in our cooperation. Now in Sagittarius, it's actually putting it into action, right? And the ritualization of our duality is this 3 degrees of Sagittarius, a square, right, to Jupiter retrograde that is expanding our own internal consciousness to access these fragments of these past situations, right? And it's going to be really important that we do not get caught completely in this moon in Sagittarius. And these are why these squares are so important, right? They're important because they give us an opportunity to change, right? These are cross purposes. We're starting to feel the ritualization of the conflict, of the duality, of the bifurcation, that there is something to be said for the practice of alchemizing these two seemingly opposite perspectives. And with Mercury stationing direct in Gemini, it's really going to activate this to a certain extent. But Jupiter, we get an opportunity right now to really understand what has happened in the past, right? And to access it in our dream state, access it in our mystical state, our transcendent state through meditation and through prayer, through getting into whatever you do, right? The sound healing, the dancing, chanting, whatever it is to get you into that space of oneness that ultimately Pisces represents. It expands within us this field that we can access that shows us, hey, this is what happened last time we did this, and we have to be aware of this. Now, like I said, the moon is in Sag. This is Jupiter's territory, and so this is going to be very interesting because the moon actually is very related to Pisces. And so I wouldn't call it a mutual reception necessarily, but there is a lot of cross understanding with the moon and Jupiter. And so when they square like that, there's something that we can learn from each other. It's at the same time, the conflict, we can see it as the means for us to actually create something new down the line, the actual process of alchemy. But at the same time, Jupiter is saying, yeah, that's I understand that, but let me expand on something way more transcendent and less action oriented and more feeling oriented. So it's going to be important. Like I said, it's really easy to get caught up in the moon and Sag and just be like, oh my gosh, I feel so positive and optimistic and I can do anything. I mean, Sagittarian people, I mean, it's an endless exercise in like what we feel like we can accomplish. And sometimes you have to eventually bring it down to earth, which is very hard because Jupiter is just expanding, and then Saturn is what brings it down to Earth. So we have Mercury stationing direct now at some point. Let's see here where it's going to station direct. So technically there we go. So by the end of today, it's going to station direct. And then the moon is going to, look at this, at the very same time, the moon is going to be in a trine to Mars in Leo. Boy, this has been, wherever Leo is in your chart, right? Mars is really just like charging his way through with all of this solar power behind him. He's ready to act on and fight for his creative passion, whatever that is. And so this can, oh boy. And this gets to a point where today, it's almost like Mars is the agent of the tower, and you have to return. There is a necessity to return to a state of chaos as a prelude to a new type of order, right? This is part of the cycle. Nature abhors a vacuum, and for all of the balance and homeostasis that it naturally tends toward, it can only do that when there is a type of chaos and non-differentiation. And it comes from an ideological attempt to create this. And so when the moon is in a trine to Mars, when Mercury stations direct, there is new stuff being formed, a psychic gestation in us, especially with the moon. That is our direct line to our intuition, our psychic ability to go very deep into ourselves by being stabilized. There are things forming under the surface that are absolutely supporting that where Mars is in terms of, you know what? I'm gonna spread these the Sabian symbol. The Sabian symbol is a communist activist is spreading revolutionary ideals. Okay, so you can look at that literally, and I think that we may find that there is a portion of people who are really emboldened by Mars right now in Leo to do just that. But if you think about it from a metaphysical, a archetypal scenario, it's the idea that in order to move past this, in order for a new type of order, right? In order to find a balance in some ways, there has to be a state of chaos and non-differentiation. And ultimately, communism, because of how it is, really pushes the ideals of collectivism and essentially leads to totalitarianism. It has every single time because the state is what controls the means of production and communist. in a communist society, it will lead to chaos. And so even in this moment here where Mars is really pushing this, and like I said, it's the agent of the tower. What is forming and what is gestating, what is developing under the surface, new elements. Wow. These two things are absolutely connected to each other and really getting a lot of traction and structural support with each other. We won't have to do much, right? But what we do have to acknowledge is that Mercury is stationing direct, and this mental metamorphosis and maturity is about to come online based on everything that we have gone over, right? We took our prep course, we've gone over all of our notes, right? We were studying, and now it's time to apply it and to apply a maturity, a metamorphosis in the way that we think and the way that we conceptualize reality and the way that we interact with information and content, right? And so just be mindful, I would say, that while all of this is happening, that there is, in fact, I mean, wait till you see the reading, when we are anxious for things to happen, and we want to make them happen, sometimes we find ourselves burning down the tower or having the tower burned down without any real, we're not learning anything from it. It's just blind destruction. And that was really yesterday. The potential for that yesterday was so strong. And now we're sitting here and we're going to see as we move into the reading, which I'm going to do right now, actually, so you can see, is that it's absolutely here. It's inevitable, right? It's just how we are going to engage with it ourselves. So let's look at the reading and see that we have the tower in the center of the reading. I can't make this shit up, guys, because here's the Hierophant again. And I have a very specific way that I do these readings in terms of shuffling and how I draw these cards and in what positions they come out. I completely just surrender myself to my own intuition. And I mean, again, we can feel the shift that has happened today. And thankfully that we have all come out of yesterday actually utilizing that water trine and finally and accepting the challenge of our transformation by applying that peak experience, regardless of how it felt, applying it to our everyday lives and to utilize it to centralize and to focus our own development and harmony within ourselves, right? And our Dharma. So what this is saying to me is that we have successfully, in a collective way, we stood up to this challenge, right? We accepted and we were successful. But it doesn't mean that it's any less impactful, as we see that the tower is at the center of this reading. So let's go through this. We know the Hierophant. We already talked about this. So this is still absolutely what's the causal factor here, which is illumination, right? We want to search for inner truth, trust our instincts, right? What is Taurus other than the fixed earth? The bull represents fertility. And where are we stabilizing to? It's into the earth, which is Taurus. It's the second house. It's our physical material world that we find ourselves in, and is Gaia, right? It is the planet herself that provides the medium for our growth. I mean, the moon is essential to life here, regardless if it's an artificial satellite or not. The reality is it's here now, and it's absolutely integral. We can't separate the moon from the tides of the oceans and the rhythm of life on this planet. And so, but that ends Cancer, and the moon at home in Cancer is the stabilization. What are we stabilizing into? It's the planet. It's Taurus. This is the Hierophant. We're stabilizing into our own inner truth and our search for it. So again, this causal factor continues to come around. And I will say, Uranus, the breaking out of structures, right? Sudden illumination, radical transformation, being in Taurus, it's not been easy, but wow, we have had access. And Uranus is going to go retrograde at the degree it's at now, okay? And is going to not exit its shadow, its post-retrograde shadow, until April of 2022. So just keep in mind that when Uranus does go retrograde, which it will soon, that we're going to come back to this point. next spring. And we're going to see, did we learn anything? Did we awaken? Did we evolve? Did we break out of our old structures and really learn how to find our own truth through our own study, right? And search, rather than relying on dogma and doctrine and somebody else's belief system. So this is still our causal factor, which eventually will lead us right here to this. Here we are. Here's the tower. I mean, thankfully, we gotten our shit together. And now it's, instead of blind destruction where we're destroying everything because we can't handle how we feel, we have now turned it around, and it's still here. And Mars is still the agent of destruction. But realize that where the trine to the moon in Sagittarius is, that there is something absolutely under the surface that is building and building in power and intensity that we don't see quite yet, right? Like new elements being formed under the surface in the core of the earth. So while Mars is being Mars and is about to move into a position where it's going to activate this destruction, right? And chaos, we know that this is part of the process. And again, this is where that moon to a sextile to Pluto earlier today or earlier this morning or last night is so essential, because it gives us something to rally around and to be propped up by culturally and socially. It binds us together, whatever it is that we discovered. So now let's talk about where we're at energetically. So the Eight of Roses is the Sangha, or the spiritual community, right? This is a very Cancerian thing too, in terms of the container of our emotional security and where we feel safe, where we feel secure emotionally, where a character can really develop. And so this is also, I think, reflected in, I mean, there's a lot of different belief systems that are represented in this card. Now, it came out this way. It came out on its side in terms of what's going on in the background, under the surface. We're still not sure about where we belong, right? And the isolation, like I said, the isolation with the, the isolation with the starseeds in particular, as we are managing this process, is still very real. But at least now we're starting to get a handle on it and feeling a little bit more optimistic, but we're still not quite there, I would say. And then we're still questioning where we belong, whom are we serving? And we want to serve a community. We want tight and really consolidated, especially with Venus about to be in an opposition to Pluto. We want consolidated and tight bonds with our family, with our loved ones, with the environment that holds us and that we are loyal to. And I think that there's still something not quite there yet under the surface. And it's really the result of our own doing. And we do have to get balanced so that we can understand where we do belong. And sometimes that's so isolating when you don't have anybody physically around you that you can talk to in real time that understands anything that you're going through. And I would argue that most of us have this experience, regardless if you're a starseed or not, at some point in your life. But I think that the isolation and people being in families, karmic situations, I know that I can speak personally to that. Karmic situations that have been agreed upon. As you'll see, the fated meeting at the top here, this is about contractual karmic relationships that we are not exactly 100% sure about, but and really struggling. This is like I said, this is happening under the surface, in the background. This is a background program that's running that is really the result of our own doing. Like I said, caught in the ruins. So we'll address that in a second. So we have the tower here at the center of this, at the heart of the matter. At the heart of the matter, the intersection of what's happening outside and what's happening inside is a total destruction. Right? The sudden breakout of structures, destroying the old, getting rid of obsolete loads, all of that stuff, and a will to change old ways. And I think that there is a will to change old ways, especially in terms of our family and emotional relationships and where we belong and don't belong. And there's also a trap. We feel trapped. And fragmented, and that is definitely going to lead us to want to Venus in Cancer. This Queen of Discs, big time. We'll get to that too. But we are up in the air. This is where our attention really is, though. There is stuff running into the background, but really where we're focusing is, again, up in the air. There are aspects that we just can't know right now because they haven't transpired yet. And there's such a strong urge to know everything that's happening, and trust is the only way, right? Especially with something like the Tower at the center of all of this. We have to trust this process. And if we push too hard, then we risk upsetting the trajectory that we've set ourselves on for, a long time ago, right? These karmic contracts that we've put into place, especially as a starseed. Like, I'm sure every starseed has this kind of like, why did I volunteer to come here? This is I'm ready to check out, right? Hit the abandoned ship, right? The emergency exit, whatever. We've all felt it, right? And but we have to trust, and we have to realize that not everything is finished yet, and we have to be okay with certain things being up in the air. And just like this balloon, we can sit there and watch it and be like, oh, that's really cool. That's up in the air. It's a beautiful thing to witness, and there's an expansiveness here. And again, remember, this is where the sun is in Cancer today. It says a magic carpet, but hot air balloon, whatever. If you look at things from the hot air balloon, you're way up in the air and you see things from a much wider perspective. And when you have a wider perspective and your nose is not right up on it, then you see it for what it is. And when we can take this as a valuable perspective, but it requires trust. And when we are feeling, especially with this Hierophant, there's a certain structure that we really want to adhere to. There's a certain authority that we want to ground us, and we really have to find it for ourselves. And that really is the highest version of the Hierophant. But our attention is on the fact that everything is still up in the air to a certain extent. And even at the heart of things, the Tower moment is here, and will be really exemplified, I think, by the end of today into tomorrow. The transits for tomorrow are substantial. And where is this leading, right? What can we reasonably expect? Well, the Queen of Discs, here's our Venus in Cancer, right? She is the mother, right? And this is also where our full moon is going to really be highlighted, because the Queen of Discs is us as people, right? These court cards represent people rather than archetypes. I mean, they do, but this is the transition from Sagittarius to Capricorn, which we're going to see with the full moon, right? And so here's our full moon after this Venus and Pluto opposition. So this individual, this is us. We want to protect our family and home. We want to be truthful. We want to be kind and tender and friendly, and use our instincts and our intuition to be responsible for all that we are surrounded by, the material reality that we find valuable. The Queen is the water, and the discs are the earth, right? That Venus and Cancer energy is so strong here. And we are going to want to protect and secure and be this person for not only ourselves and our families and whoever and whatever we find valuable, but it's also going to get us up to speed with what it is we need to really do to get our shit together, to be successful, right? When this full moon comes, we're going to see it, because we're going to, that there's still going to be this kind of runaround of like, self-justification about where we stabilize ourselves. Are we sure we want to do this? Is this where we want to be? I don't know, blah, 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 blah. It's normal, okay? It's definitely normal. And this Eight of Roses at the underlying aspect here in the subconscious is reflecting this really strongly. And so what to reasonably expect is that we are going to step into this role where we're going to want to protect and be secure and really take responsibility for what and who we value. And that might mean that we're just going to have to let it all go. yeah, we're going to have to let a lot go and be very mindful and realize what it is that is valuable to us. Because if we try to hold on to everything that's being released right now and that has to go away, then we're really going to struggle, right? That's that tower reversed. And that was a real potential yesterday. I mean, we were really facing this blind destruction by people not collectively just sitting in their discomfort and letting it move through them, because you learn so much when you do that. Now, there's some guidance here that's really just about how we're in control of all of this. Number one, feeling trapped. Now, number 16 is the tower. Number 16, caught in the ruins. Sudden breakout, right? We have to realize that even if situations come in that seem to be out of our control, we have to come to terms with the fact that it's really about our ability to break out and to break out of these structures and to realize that they're self-imposed, right? That's really, Uranus in the chart starts the process of what Pluto finishes. And it's not easy. And a lot of times it feels like we're out of control. But when it comes down to it, if we accept that this is actually breaking us free from our own self-imposed prison, our own self-imposed trap, then we're going to be a lot better off, especially when it comes to where we feel we belong, right? That 8 of Roses, the community that we feel that we belong to. If we're not feeling secure about that, and a lot of us aren't still, we're like, where's my community? Like, what's going on? Then it's important that we realize that all of our discomfort emotionally around this is really it's self-imposed. We have to take ourselves out of our own prison and realize that it's all up to us. And so sometimes these events come into our life because they happen to, let's say, for instance, my partner's in my partner's chart right now, transiting Uranus is sitting right on his midheaven, sitting right on it. And we'll come back to this in April, right? And so, I mean, there's been a lot of conversation in the last day or so, really coming to a head about his career and what he's doing. And, you know, Uranus sitting on your midheaven, I mean, you're getting shook up. And so who knows what's going to happen necessarily. But when you look at the chart as an intentional blueprint that your soul has drafted as a result of incarnating at that time and place to give you the birth chart that you have, you realize that it's all been set up from the beginning. And we'll get to that in a minute, because that's really strongly reflected here too. Now, the tortoise is about being fragmented and do whatever it is to get grounded. And this also means our energy is fragmented, right? If we're getting pulled all over the place emotionally because we're like, where's my community? I feel so isolated and alone. And I don't know if I even want to be here. Do I even want to fulfill this contract, because I am just kind of over humanity right now and what's going on? It's important that we take some time to take a breath, or 5 or 10, really get grounded and slow down, okay? Because it's really easy to get all worked up emotionally when we are not emotionally grounded. Or energetically grounded. So some key words about the tortoise, right? Longevity, determination, adaptability, patience, stability, focus, steadiness, right? It's like I said, if we are emotionally and under the surface in the background, not stable about our spiritual community, our family ties, where we feel we belong, then yeah, we're going to be easily pulled off course and really worked up. And this is, again, important to realize that the breakout is there to show us that we have the choice, right? But we have to get grounded and slow down and be methodical and realize that while everything is crumbling around us in your personal life, in the world out there, we get to be stabilized and grounded, because we know that this is actually testing our character, testing our will, and is part of a necessity for later in the year. I'm telling you, once these, come September, October, I mean, talk about October surprise. We thought it was last year, and boy, it's definitely this year. If there was going to be a year, because that's when Pluto stations direct, Saturn stations direct. Oh my Lord. Okay. So getting grounded. So we when it comes to up in the air, when we realize that we have, and trusting that we have the resources to get through the challenge, and the challenge may be just like, all right, I'm just going to let it go and trust that I don't have all the information yet, but you have everything within you that you need. So some more keywords about the camel, because it goes along with the tortoise. Really, because the tortoise has the shell, right, outside, has his own, carries its home. And then the camel has the water within in order to sustain and nourish along a very long journey. So some key words for the camel. They're gonna sound familiar. Determination, steadiness, endurance, stamina, optimism. There's that moon in Sagittarius. Adaptability, survival, and accomplishment. Okay, so you can see that the tortoise and the camel, a camel can move if they need to, but they tend to move at their own pace, just like the tortoise. I mean, both of these are signals to us, regardless if it's under the surface or out in our awareness, that we have everything that we need to slow down, be methodical, realize that everything we need is with us, and trust the process. And realize that the tower is not something to be afraid of, but to value, for it is busting us out of our own self-imposed prisons. And sometimes we need to be shook up in order for that to happen. Now, fated meeting, again, up in the air. It's not time yet. How do you know? You see, the clock strikes midnight, right? There's a big element here about timing that is something we need to consider and to bring into our awareness. If we're getting anxious, if we want to know the whole thing right now, if we don't think we have the resources to get through the challenge, all of these things are going to impact our ability to stay still and to be patient for the right timing. This is, I can't overstate this. And this is about karmic contracts, bringing you together in order to honor your karmic course. A lot of people right now are in situations that they have set up in order to clear away. However, it turns out you're doing that. And it's going to come through this tower moment, right? And again, it's going to lead to us kind of having this mature, steady, stable ability to be able to pull in and pull in what is valuable to us as some sort of matriarch, right? The queen of discs. This is not the princess. This is the queen. She is in Sagittarius to Capricorn, right? What is Capricorn? This is boss mode. This is ambition and success, but this is the responsibility that Saturn provides. And as much as is the paternal aspect, it still has a feminine resonance because it's an earth sign. And that is the father, not father as a warrior. That's Mars, the divine masculine warrior. The father it's still a protector and a nurturer, and it provides boundaries, this paternal aspect that Capricorn represents. And so even the queen is fulfilling this purpose through her sensitivity and her tenderness and her kindness, but she's still, and that's very Venusian, right? But she's still going to pull in towards her that which is most valuable to her in the midst of this destructive moment. So just trust that you have everything that you need, and just be willing to let the process unfold, because there's a reason that we are here. And we've put all of this on course for a reason. Now, it's up to us how we choose to interact with this energy, right? This is just a snapshot of a moment in time. And it does seem to me, based on what yesterday's reading was, and I can attest to this in my own personal development, my own personal experience of yesterday into today, that we have flipped the script and that we have accepted what is happening as part of the bigger picture. And if we can acknowledge that we have everything we need, if we can be patient for the right timing of things, then know that we're going to be able to very maturely pull in and hold fast what it is that is valuable to us in our lives, and let the rest of it go. Just let the rest of it go. You have everything you need embedded in you, right? You have all of the water you need for your journey. You have your own shell on your back that allows you to be grounded and stable and secure. You're not trying to get away from anything. You're not trying to get anywhere. The tortoise, right? Just put your head in your shell if you need to be protected from the storm that comes through, right? It's just an idea. All right, guys, I think I'm going to leave it there. That was quite a transmission. Certainly a lot different than yesterday's energy for all of us. I have no doubt. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to do this real quick. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. This has been, it's just been an incredible time. And I feel so honored to be here as part of this process with all y'all, all the star seeds, because that's really where my focus is. Of course, if you're not a star seed, that doesn't mean I can't work with you and give you valuable insight into your chart. But just about everybody I work with that is attracted to this type of message tends to be a star seed. So it is what it is, right? And even if you're not a star seed, you're here on purpose. You're here because you're part of this plan, regardless of what it is that you end up doing. So if you are interested in a reading or energy work as well, I find that that is really helping right now. Reiki and shamanic energy work are saving my life right now. And that is something that it can be done at a distance. So you can also reach out for that as well. You can go to the website. It's in the description box below, as well as Facebook and Telegram links for social media connection if that's something that you are interested in. And as always, I appreciate each and every one of you. I love you. I'll be back tomorrow for the Daily Medicine transmission in my true, authentic, raw nature, just like the rest of us, because that's really the only way that we're going to succeed, I think, is that when we are just real with ourselves and authentic and holding each other accountable and just seeing each other, right? Just holding space for each other to be and see for every, all of the experiences that we're having. So if you want to be seen and feel like you need just some validation of your existence right now in a way that is you don't often get, that is my wheelhouse. So you can always book through Catalyst Energies. There's a lot of different types of services that meet a lot of different price points. So there's certainly something there for everyone. I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good day.